So, Jennifer, how did this come about?
So 7 or 8 years ago, our youngest son went to college, and I didn't have much to do. So I thought, well, we have a few stories to tell, so why don't we try documentary films? And that's literally how this started. I met my producing partner through his wife. I said, hey, Kyle's a senior at Drexel. Maybe we should film that year and just see what happens. And today you saw what happened.
So Katie, how did the first conversation go with the two of you with regards to what film we're going to make? Like, what are the goals here? What were the initial goals at the very, very beginning?
Well, there's another beat in between sort of what Jen is talking about. So there was there's many beats to the story of this film. So there was another team that filmed Kyle's last year at Drexel. And they did about a 40-minute film that kind of focused, on intercutting that year with archival footage. So it was a lovely short film. Jen had that and felt that there was still something that was not complete to the story, but she wasn't necessarily sure what that was. So we started meeting at that point. I had seen that film, I had seen other of the archival footage, and I was transfixed by that archival footage. I was a mom of two, young, medium-aged kids at the time, and it was hit me like a ton of bricks in the heart, this idea of, being in this room, having this intentionality with your kids. I really had never seen footage like that before. Mm-hmm. So we met, and I felt really strongly at that point that there was kind of a third leg of the stool that was missing, which was incorporating the family and their stories, which they hadn't really told until that point. Mm-hmm. So it took a little convincing to get her to agree that they were going to lend themselves to the film, because of course everybody felt that this essentially is Kyle's story, but the only way we were going to get to Kyle sort of as the nucleus was to give a little space to the rest of the group. So we worked for a long time on that, and then at a certain point Dan came in to help us with some structure and some upgrading sort of and this extraordinary animation that is in the film. Dan took the lead on that.
Take it away, Dan.
Yeah. Oh, did I just turn my mic off? I think I did. There we go. I came in, there was sort of a version of the film, and I kind of restructured it and did some additional interviews, really trying to look at everybody as an individual character that had an arc, and how can we kind of get a satisfying storyline for each of them. And just treating, kind of coming in blind and not knowing the long history that had gone on with the previous teams and iterations, and just said, how do we make this into a film that people will connect with? And so we kind of recut it, and I did new animation and all that stuff.
So
that's what it is.
Kyle, the question is, how did you feel about all this? I mean, about having the cameras around all the time and being interviewed and talking about your life?
That's a great question, Scott. It's an interesting process. I mean, it's sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity to sort of have this moment to really tell your story about growing up as a kid and everything that you went through. And I really took the film as sort of a video diary. If you had imagine if you had a video diary and you're like, okay, this is it. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to do it now in this moment. It was just sort of you know what? I'm going to tell the truth. This is what happened. This is my story. And I just took that moment, and I think it was really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
Thanks, Scott.
So Jennifer, I want to ask you, when you're watching this movie, your interviews, you are so passionate. You are so you're clear on what it is you want this film to be. Was that evident from the very beginning, or did you kind of figure it out as the movie was sort of being produced?
It's interesting. I started my film company with this film, so I feel like I kind of grew up as a producer while we were doing the film. I learned a ton at every iteration, every round of notes, that kind of thing. But I think the thing that was most important to us was making sure that we kept Kyle's voice. So, how often do you get a person like Kyle to narrate their own story as well? So that's what Katie worked with me on. That's what Dan worked with me on, was making sure, yes, we need the family, we need other voices, but we really have to make sure we keep Kyle's voice.
Okay, so talk more about that if you could, about the conversations that you had to make sure that Kyle's voice was front and center, even though you were bringing all this balance in with it being informational and of course being personal with the family, but about being steadfast to what Jennifer wanted.
Yeah, there's a lot, as you can see from the cut you saw. I mean, there are a lot of interviews with Kyle. You talk about this video diary sensibility. We talked to Kyle a lot, and it would be because you would do these interviews, and then you would rewatch them or listen to them and see oh, there's a little wormhole we could go down here, or we could go deeper here, and you can only put people through so much, right? You do an interview for an hour and a half. I mean, who knows how much is there? And I think it's this sense of continuing to go back to the spine of what feels true to him. I mean, there's these touchstones about it taking a long time to get through this stuff. That was really big for me. That the statements around his sensibility here. I'll just finish this. Sensibility of what he brought to fashion in terms of that always, and it was sometimes harder for you to put that into words, but just that sense of this was a gift to me in this other world, right? So I feel and I'm sure Dan feels the same, you kind of pick 4 or 5 of these really truthful statements from Kyle, and then you kind of try to line up the structure around these are what was true to him.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I just want to riff off of that really quick. And, sort of how I view autism now is, it's not my main world. It's a world that's a part of my past, but one of the gifts of it is sort of my unique way that I sort of channel or transcend into a space where I can think about fashion, and it came naturally from that world, and it's something that I use in my everyday life. But it's something that I always say it's I have a toy box that I keep in a shelf in the closet. I can take down that toy box and I can open it up and I can reminisce and, play with the toys in there. And then when I'm done, I can, put the toys away. I can close the lid on the box. I can put the lid back in the closet, and then I can close the closet door. And, I think that's what Kate was referencing, was there is this special, unique thing that I just inherited from my childhood that, I use my world of imagination. I use the world of imagination that autism gave me, and I'm always thankful for that.
When it comes to the prep and the research, especially the research, I mean, Jennifer, you lived it. You did a whole lot of research over the years. But Dan, what kind of research and prep did you and Katie do? Because this was new for you. So what kind of prep and research did you do, and what were some of the things that you discovered along the way?
Well, I think I did a fairly deep dive into what the treatments were like in at the time that Kyle got into the Sunrise program, and we found that there's a clip from the Sunrise movie. There was the feature film, a scripted film, kind of about the story of the kid that Sunrise was based on, and it's very dated and strange, but it was kind of fascinating to see that. But kind of just, I was fascinated because I didn't know anything about this world, just to find out how different those two approaches were, and one of the things that I really wanted to, or I think one of the things that I did when I came on was bring in sort of voices that were sort of outside of the Sunrise world, like Andrew Sheehan, the therapist who had worked in the program but then left it and now kind of works outside of it, and was able to kind of give a perspective of well, it's a great program in some ways, and it works for some kids, but these are some of the downsides of it. And so I wanted to make sure that we had kind of a balance in talking about the different approaches.
You looked like you were going to say something, Kyle.
Well, I mean, I think I think Dan made some great points about what the treatment options were, and I think my mom could really speak to that in terms of she found the Sunrise program through a friend at a Christmas party, a guest. It was completely random, and I think she can speak more on that. But it really was, at the time, there really wasn't a lot. Between 1993 to 2004, when autism really was becoming mainstream, there just wasn't a lot of options. It wasn't really talked about. So, with this story, we always say we hope this is one story about autism. It's not the story, but we hope it brings hope to your story. And so for us, I think that's what's really important.
Well, that's the other thing, Jennifer, is that this is more than just about autism. This is going to help a lot of people, I think. This is about bigger issues. Was that something that was conscious for all of you as you were making the film, or did you just make the film and then look back and go, actually, wow, this really does impact a lot of things?
Well, I think Kyle made the point, which is the awareness of not even just autism, but mental health today is a completely different space than when we started the film. So really, we started the film because we thought, all right, a lot of people have said you have to tell your story, and I just couldn't figure out what was the right medium to use. So like I said, when documentary films came along, I thought, all right, we could do it that way. It took us 7 years to get it to a point where I felt like this is the story, this is the truth, this is our truth. As Kyle said, it's just one story. But the reality is we did a Sunrise program. So I can't apologize for that. But it also, there was, I think, as Dan and Katie pointed out, there were definitely flaws with the program as well. So we wanted to make sure we could keep it as balanced as possible but still be true to the story.
Kyle, while you were being interviewed, the process of your interviews, was there a part that was harder for you to talk about?
That's a great question. I think for me, when it comes to talking about family, I think, if anyone wants to talk about their family, I think it's, immediate waterworks, etc. I mean, it's something so personal and so close. So I think, always being asked questions about family, I think it's just always, that's like number one. And it's also one thing that I love to talk about, because I mean, who doesn't like talking about their family and where they're from? I mean, but I think for me, I really took every question that I was asked and really came up with a really thoughtful and really a response that stayed true to who I was and my values. And so that's how I led with the film.
So during my course, moderating these types of conversations with filmmakers, especially documentary filmmakers, so many of them talk about how they started the movie with this goal in mind, and then they're making the film, they're doing their interviews, and their goals change. Maybe somebody says something and they go, wait, that's our movie. So did your goals, Katie, change throughout the course of the filmmaking process?
This was a really collaborative process. I mean, when I discuss how there's the other team that started at Drexel, and then, my involvement, Dan's involvement, and the collaboration with the family, it's like a constant dialogue about what is this film? Because even when we say it's our truth, it is their truth, but my God, there's so many ways to, there's so many avenues to get to truth, and how do you bring an audience along the path of that truth in a way that's going to be effective, right? So, I mean, I don't know that there were moments that radically changed. I mean, I do think that we had a lot of conversations about how much background do you need about what the autism landscape was at that time. I would say we definitely dialed that way up and way down in different iterations. There was different iterations around the involvement of the siblings. I mean, which now it's like you're always turning up and down these dials. I don't know that we had something in this process. And there's also the question of like, when do you end the film, right? This is not a historical figure. We are, and so it's really hard to figure out like when is the right moment to sort of say like, hey, we're done. Let's turn off the cameras. So I think those were the questions for us on this, rather than like, wow, we're making this 180-degree turn.
Well, and I don't know if you noticed, but we didn't have a lot in there about the middle years. So like puberty and things like that, we started down that road. But, really, I think fashion was the thing. And so building that thread to where Kyle was a little guy in Cinderella dress-ups, through Cinderella to then fashion school, and then to being a fashion designer, it just became more of an important thread than touching on every single aspect of his growing up. So I think there were, like Katie said, there were moments we looked at it and we're like, all right, that has to go. Because we just can't build that out the way it's gonna be useful to the story.
So I would love to open this up to the audience if anybody has questions. And before I do that, hold that thought. But I just want to ask one question. This is going to get a little existential. But since you've sat through screenings, you've watched a film yourself, Kyle, was there something that you discovered about yourself watching a movie about you?
That's a really good question. And I think what's interesting, I think every time you watch a film, I think you always see something new. It's like whenever I watch Schitt's Creek for like the 6,000th time because it's so amazing, I'm always like, oh my God, I just discovered that joke here and there. And so I think you find little things. And I think, I just think that's such a fun process. But I think in terms of, learning about yourself, I think you always learn what you can and can't handle. And I think, from doing the Q&As to doing interviews to doing, just going out and talking about this film, you really learn about yourself and how independent you can be and what you can do. And, even, I say in the program, where I say in the film, starting out having conversations and dialogue with people and strangers and people I didn't know was like arachnophobia. And then in college, I was the person that was like, don't talk to me. I'm going to have a conversation with you and I'm going to procrastinate. So it went from point A to point B. And so I think this is just a kaleidoscope of that journey in a way.
Wow, that's a great answer. And where was that question? I think that was yours. Oh, right here. You. Yeah, go ahead. Nice and loud, please.
I love the film. I'm moved, so forgive the shaky voice. I just wondered, with your the background footage, did you start at the beginning thinking, okay, I'm gonna make a film, or how did you end up filming so much?
It seems like that would be the case because there was so much footage. But the big part of the Sunrise program was filming your volunteers and people that worked with Kyle so that we could constantly record what was happening. How was he doing? How was he reacting to this? What were the isms he was involved with at the time, so that we could always be adjusting the program and how we were working with him. So that's really what all that footage was about.
How much footage did you have in the end?
Oh, geez, what do you think?
I mean,
500 hours?
Yeah, hundreds of hours.
In all various, I literally took a gigantic box of tapes of every shape and size, dropped it at my producer friend's feet and said, here you go. I don't know what you do with this.
But what's funny too is, they were not intending to make a documentary of any of that. So you'd have a tape in there and you'd be like, oh, this is really interesting. And then you'd have like, a Gossip Girl recorded over that tape, right? I mean, it'd all be like right in the same stuff.
That's where you saw some of the footage from Germany, or the kids playing in the basement, or footage that my daughter filmed of Jake and she. So that was all mixed in.
Oh, I used to get so mad when my parents taped over my Star Trek episodes. Who else has a question? Yes, you in the glasses.
I have a comment and kind of a question, a couple of things to share. Firstly, I want to much you were able to accomplish for your senior thesis or collection was just incredible. And I was really moved at the coverage of that and how you were able to kind of intertwine that in without it being all about the fashion show as the end all be all. And I love that you continued it through to this moving beyond, meaning the chapter of your life. And as an adult, living in the world and having started in a room, and then you kind of were in New York City, one of the biggest cities in the world. And I just want to commend you for that because it's not an easy road to be on and to stay creative. So.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think for me, the whole process of the collection and doing the whole thing, I think what's so cool is I think the film kind of really shows up what lined up naturally. I mean, one of the things going back to some of the previous questions in terms of did you see anything that was lining up?
Yeah.
Really is, the tribe that Cinderella had got repeated in real life. I mean, Sally and that, all of my professors and everyone, it was like, it was almost like a microcosm version of Cinderella brought into 3D. And so I just happened to be Cinderella at the time. And so I just thought that was just a great point that was brought through. And it was so true. And it's just so natural on the way that happened.
What kind of reaction have you gotten from people who've seen the film? Maybe at a Q&A conversation where there was a reaction that really stood out to you. Was there something special that was said at one of these screenings that really meant a lot to you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, I did a screening at my alma mater at Drexel, and we had a student who was on the spectrum, and she really connected with a lot of the points in the film that really connected with her own life, and it really created a moment in the Q&A that was special, I think, for everyone in the audience and the entire room. It really brought everyone together in this one moment, and it was pretty spectacular. I would say that's probably the number one highlight.
That would be pretty high. And also, what react? Oh, you got a question? Okay.
I have a question for Kyle. So I'm curious. I saw you in the movie. I saw you wearing a hard of hearing. I mean, were you wearing a hearing aid at one scene? And did you ever depend on sign, or were you always just speech?
That's a great question. I was a little bit hard of hearing, but it was mostly from ear infections. And so over the years, I had many operations that allowed it to be cleared up. But the need for sign wasn't specifically needed. But I do think sign language is a really incredible art form. And I think it's a really beautiful language that needs to be celebrated in its own right. So yeah, but thank you. I appreciate that.
And Jennifer, is there anything else that you hope people take away from Let Me Be Me?
Well, this young man's question is exactly it. Everyone that from the people who've come and spoken to me after the film, it's remarkable how people will say, well, an older man who's a father of children would say, I really resonated with your husband's story. Siblings of kids who have special needs in some way or form would say, I really resonated with your daughter and your son, Jake. Moms come up to me. Last night, someone came up to me and had really exactly the same story. Same child, almost the same isms, same age. So that connection is really what I feel is most powerful about the film, is helping people, as Kyle said just a few minutes ago, in some way connect, seeing our story, just this one story, helping you connect to your story. And I hope it helps you find hope in your story, because there's hope in everyone's story.
Kyle, you get the last word.
Mm-hmm. I think what's special about Let Me Be Me is I think anyone can watch it and see something special. And like I think my mom just said, really bring hope to their own story. And I think hope is super powerful, and I think it's great. I think we need more of it.
For sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that you have seen Let Me Be Me, spread the word about it. And how do you spread the word? Obviously, go on social media. So go on Facebook, go on Instagram, maybe don't go on Twitter. But spread the word. And I just have to say to my friends here from Philadelphia, which is where I was born, give my regards to South Street. Thank you, everyone, for being here at Film Independent. Thank you so much.